The show is called Darcey and Stacey, not Stacey and Darcey, not the Silva twins, not some alphabetical arrangement or a coin flip decided in a production meeting. Darcey first. Always Darcey first. And for the entirety of this show's run, that title ordering reflected something real. Darcey was the anchor, the draw, the name that casual viewers recognized when they were scrolling past on a Tuesday night and stopped. She was the face in the thumbnail, the storyline that drove the conversation the morning after an episode aired. The reason people who had never watched a single second of 90 Day Fiancé in their lives somehow knew exactly who Darcey Silva was. Stacey was beloved. Stacey was essential. Stacey was the twin that fans who actually watched felt deeply connected to. But Stacey was second. Everyone understood this, including Stacey, including Darcey, including TLC's programming executives, including the algorithm that decides whose content reaches how many people on any given morning. Until recently, when the numbers came out. And the numbers, follower counts, engagement rates, brand inquiry volume, casting interest from competing networks, told a story that nobody in the Darcey and Stacey universe was prepared to read. The title is still Darcey and Stacey, but the metrics now read Stacey and Darcey. And the silence from one sister about the other's sudden ascension is the loudest thing either of them has produced in years. If this is your first time here, welcome to the Tell All Tapes, the channel that reads between the lines of everything the 90 Day universe puts in front of you and tells you what's actually happening underneath it. If you've been here before, you already know what we do. Hit that like button right now, subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications, because what we are about to walk through today is the kind of story that only gets more complicated the deeper you go, and you are going to want to be here for every chapter of it. Now, let's get into it properly. The trap in this entire situation is built from love. The specific, performed, publicly declared love of a sister who has said on camera, in interviews, in captions, in the kind of off-the-cuff moments that reality television specializes in catching, that she wants Stacey to succeed, that she supports her twin completely, that their success is shared, that what belongs to one belongs to both. Those declarations were genuine in the way that declarations made before the scenario they are being tested by are always genuine, which is to say, genuinely felt in the absence of the test, and genuinely complicated when the test finally arrives. Saying your win is my win when you are winning more is a beautiful thing to say and an easy thing to mean. Saying it when she is winning more, when the follower count notification on your phone shows your sister's number climbing past yours for the first time in the entire documented history of your shared public life, is a test of a completely different kind. Not a test of what you say, a test of what you actually feel when the words you've always said meet a reality that the words were never designed to survive. The test has arrived. The declaration is now being evaluated against reality, and the evaluation is not producing the unified twin response that years of "your win is my win" content promised the world it would produce. To understand why this moment lands with the weight that it does, you have to understand the specific architecture of what Darcey and Stacey built together and what each of them contributed to it. When this franchise began, Darcey was already a presence. She had come through the 90-day pipeline with a story that the audience connected to on a visceral level, not because it went well, because it absolutely did not go well, but because there was something in the way Darcey experienced her own life that viewers recognized. She was not performing heartbreak. She was not manufacturing drama for camera time. She was genuinely, transparently, almost painfully in the middle of wanting things and not getting them in the way she wanted them. And that transparency made her magnetic in a way that more polished, more strategic reality television personalities rarely manage to be. People watched Darcey because watching Darcey felt like watching something real. Stacey came into the picture slightly differently. She was the grounding force, the voice of reason that the audience could look to when Darcey was in full spiral mode. The sister who had seemingly figured out a version of what Darcey was still searching for, a relationship that was stable, a partnership that had actual structural integrity, a life that looked, from the outside at least, like it was moving in a coherent direction. Stacey was aspirational in a way that Darcey, in those early seasons, was not. And that contrast, Darcey the beautiful chaos, Stacey the beautiful stability, created a dynamic that the show mined brilliantly. You watched Darcey with your heart in your throat. You watched Stacey and exhaled. But here is the thing about being cast as the exhale in someone else's story. It does not generate the kind of attention that keeps your name at the top of the search results. It does not produce viral moments. It does not make you the one whose name casual viewers say when someone asks them what reality shows they are watching. Being the stable one is valuable to the people who are close to you. Being the stable one does not necessarily make you the one the algorithm surfaces first. So for years, the dynamic held. Darcey at the center, Stacey essential but adjacent. The title is intact. The industry's understanding of who the primary draw was intact. And then, not gradually, not through some slow shift that everyone had time to adjust to, but with the specific suddenness that social media metrics sometimes produce, something changed. Stacey had a moment, a high-profile media moment of the kind that lands correctly, spreads correctly, generates the kind of organic engagement that money cannot buy and strategy can only partially manufacture. And in the 30 days that followed that moment, the numbers moved. They moved in a direction that nobody had the infrastructure, professional or emotional, to process. In those 30 days following Stacey's moment, her social following grew at a rate that was 4.7 times the rate of Darcey's growth in the same period. Let that number sit with you for a second. Not double, not triple, 4.7 times. Her engagement rate, the specific metric that tells you not just how many people follow someone, but how many of those people are actually paying attention, actually interacting, actually present in the audience rather than just numerically counted in it, crossed above Darcey's for the first time in documented history. And then came the detail that has the industry quietly talking in the spaces where these conversations happen. 2 brand partnership inquiries that had previously been structured for both sisters, the classic twin package deal, both names, same rate, unified campaign, were resubmitted. Resubmitted specifically, exclusively, and only for Stacey. Not the package, not the twins, Stacey. Solo. At a rate that reflected the new metric reality rather than the old arrangement. Those resubmitted inquiries represent a dollar figure, and the dollar figure is specific enough that when it reached Darcey, because in the talent management ecosystem, these things always reach the person whose name was not on the new inquiry. sometimes through official channels, and sometimes through the kind of informal communication that moves faster than official channels ever could. The silence that followed was notable, even by the standards of people who are professionally skilled at managing silence. Now here is where the double bind comes in, and this is the part of this situation that I find genuinely fascinating from a structural standpoint, because it is a bind that only exists in the very specific geometry of identical twin celebrities, and it has no clean exit. If Darcey celebrates Stacey's ascension publicly, if she posts the congratulatory story, if she shows up in Stacey's content with genuine energy, if she deploys the twin power content with the same enthusiasm she would have brought to it when the power was flowing roughly equally between them, she is performing graciousness in a moment that feels, privately, like a form of displacement. And performed graciousness has a slightly different texture than the real thing. It moves slightly differently. It lands slightly differently. And Darcey's audience, which has been studying Darcey's texture for years, which has logged hours and hours of watching Darcey actually feel things, is not an audience that is easily fooled by the performed version of an emotion it has seen the real version of. If she stays quiet, if the congratulations do not materialize, if the supportive stories do not get posted, if the twin power content goes conspicuously and unexpectedly silent at precisely the moment when the metrics suggest that one of them has moved ahead of the other, the absence is its own statement. Louder in many ways than anything she could post. A silence at a moment when speech was expected is not neutral. It is a communication. And everyone in the audience who tracks these things will read it as one. She cannot win this moment through content strategy. She cannot post her way through it. She cannot caption her way around it. The only path through this particular bind runs through the interior, through actually doing the real interior work of being genuinely happy for the person who has, for the first time in the history of their shared public life, moved ahead of her. And that work does not have a posting schedule. That work does not photograph well. That work happens in private, in the uncomfortable space between what you have always said you felt and what you are now discovering you actually feel, when the situation tests those words for real. To be genuinely fair to Darcey here, and I want to be, because this channel is not about tearing people down, it is about understanding what is actually happening and why Darcey has never been someone who lacked self-awareness. She has, across years of cameras following her life, demonstrated a capacity for reflection that is actually unusual in this space. She knows herself. She knows her patterns. She has sat in front of cameras and articulated those patterns with a clarity that should not be possible for someone in the middle of living them out. That self-awareness is real. But self-awareness and the ability to metabolize a specific, unprecedented emotional challenge in real time are two different capabilities. You can know exactly what is happening to you and still not have built the internal architecture to handle it gracefully. And the internal architecture required to handle being surpassed by your twin, by the person who is genetically you, who started from the same place, who had access to the same raw material of life that you had, is not something most people have ever needed to build. Because most people are not identical twins who have built parallel public careers. And most people, therefore, never face the specific, precise, almost surgical pain of watching the person who is most like you find a way to do what you do better than you are currently doing it. Darcey has built her public identity, her professional identity, and in many ways her personal identity around external metrics, the relationship status, the follower count, the network's enthusiasm, the audience's attention, the brand's interest. When those metrics are favorable, when the relationship is exciting, when the numbers are growing, when TLC is centering her story and brands are coming to her, and the audience is surging toward her content, she is magnetic. She is the most compelling version of herself. The cameras genuinely love her in those moments because she is genuinely, fully alive in them. When the metrics shift, when the external validation contracts or redirects or moves in a direction she was not anticipating, she does not have a deeply developed internal system to fall back on. This is not a character flaw, exactly. It is a consequence of a life lived largely in public, where the feedback loop between how you feel and how the outside world is responding to you becomes so tight over time that the two things can start to feel like one thing. The follower count was never supposed to move in this direction. The brand inquiries were never supposed to come back with her name removed. These are new data points arriving in a system that was calibrated for a different arrangement. And Darcey, who has always been emotionally sophisticated, but who has also always been underneath the sophistication, genuinely fragile in the specific way that people who need external validation to feel stable are fragile, is now processing a data shift that her entire identity architecture was not designed to accommodate. And she is processing it in real time. While cameras, if not literal cameras, then the perpetual camera of social media and public observation remain on. Watch for the joint content push when it comes, and it will come, because it is the most available strategic response to the situation, even if it is not the most authentic one. Watch for the deliberately twinned posts, the synchronized outfits making a return, the coordinated appearances. The "we are stronger together" energy deployed at exactly the moment when the metrics are suggesting that one of them is in fact stronger apart. It will look like unity. It will be photographed beautifully because both of these women know how to photograph beautifully. It is among the things they are genuinely excellent at. The comments will fill with twin power and heart emojis and declarations that this is what real sisterhood looks like. And the people who track these things, the metric watchers, the engagement analysts, the followers who have been in this community long enough to notice patterns, who have noticed that Stacey's individual content is currently outperforming their joint content and that Darcey's individual content is underperforming both, those people will see the joint push for exactly what it is, not a spontaneous celebration of sisterhood, a strategic deployment of sisterhood as a corrective mechanism. Twin power not as an expression of genuine unity, but as a brand intervention. The most emotionally resonant asset in their shared professional arsenal being activated not because the moment calls for it emotionally, but because the metrics call for it financially. All of it dressed in matching outfits, photographed in good light, captioned with something about gratitude and sisterhood and being blessed to do life with your best friend. The financial dimension of this is where things get structurally significant in a way that transcends the personal, because money has a way of making everything that was previously soft and emotional very hard and legible very quickly. Brand partnerships in the twin content space are typically negotiated as packages. Both sisters, same rate, same campaign, presented as a unified entity with a combined reach that justifies a combined investment. That structure functions smoothly when the sisters are roughly equivalent in reach and engagement, when the package deal represents a genuine multiplication of a single investment rather than a subsidy of one career by another. When one sister measurably and documentably surpasses the other in the specific metrics that brand managers and their analytics teams actually use to evaluate return on influencer investment, the package deal becomes a question that someone in a marketing department is eventually going to ask out loud. Why are we paying for the package when we can pay for the one who moves the numbers and get better results at a comparable or lower cost? That question is currently being asked, not hypothetically, not as a future possibility, currently, in marketing departments that have ongoing or pending relationships with the Darcey and Stacey brand. And the answer that those departments arrive at, the answer that the resubmitted inquiries with only one name on them suggest they are already arriving at, will restructure the financial relationship between the sisters in ways that no amount of synchronized content and twin power captions can reverse once the restructuring is complete. This is the part of the story that the comment sections of their posts will not discuss, because comment sections are not where the business conversations happen. But the business conversations are happening. They were happening before the resubmitted inquiries, which were themselves the result of business conversations that had already reached a conclusion. And the conclusions that business conversations reach have a way of becoming reality on a timeline that does not wait for the people most affected by them to be emotionally prepared. Here is the thematic core of everything we have been building toward. And I want to take a moment with it because it is the piece that I think matters most, not just as entertainment, not just as analysis of a reality television dynamic, but as something that reflects a very human truth that extends well beyond the Silva sisters and their metrics and their matching outfits and their brand inquiries. What do we actually mean when we say we want the people we love to succeed? What are the precise boundaries of that statement? What version of their success are we actually signing up for when we make that declaration? And what happens when the success that arrives is a version we never mentally modeled, never emotionally prepared for, never truly meant when we said the words? Darcey has said she wants Stacey to succeed more times than either of them can count. She has said it in confessionals. She has said it in sit-down interviews where the lighting was good and the intention was clear. She has said it in captions and in comments and in the kind of semi-private moments that reality television cameras catch and broadcast to millions of people who then treat those moments as windows into something genuine. And I believe she meant it. I genuinely do. I believe she meant every single iteration of that statement with the full sincerity available to her at the moment she said it. But I also believe she meant it conditionally, in a way that she herself may not have been fully conscious of, because the condition was never tested before, so there was never any reason to examine it. She meant it in the version of success where Stacey succeeds while Darcey succeeds more. She meant it in the arrangement where both of them are winning, but the title order is maintained, where Stacey's wins are real and celebrated and genuinely shared in, but where those wins exist within a framework that keeps the original hierarchy intact. She meant your win is my win, while the wins were roughly equivalent in size and scope and industry impact. The version of the statement that is now being tested, does she mean it when Stacey's win is bigger than hers? When Stacey's win is generating the brand inquiries with only one name on them? when the argument could be made and is being made in certain industry conversations that the title should arguably now read Stacey and Darcey, that version of the statement has never been tested before in the entire history of their relationship, personal or professional. The test is active, the results are incoming, and how those results land will tell us more about Darcey Silva than 7 seasons of cameras following her through relationships and renovations and late nights in hotel bars in foreign countries ever managed to. Now let's talk about Stacey's side of this, because Stacey's position in this dynamic is not as simple as the one who won, and it would be reductive and actually inaccurate to treat it that way. Stacey is navigating something genuinely complicated here too, and the navigation requires a kind of precision that most people would find exhausting even to think about. She has had a moment. The moment was real. The numbers are real. The resubmitted inquiries with her name on them are real. But she is living with those real things inside a relationship, a twin relationship, a lifelong relationship, the foundational relationship of her entire existence that requires her to manage her own success as carefully as she manages her content calendar. Because here is the specific trap that Stacey is now walking through. If she leans into the moment, if she lets herself be publicly, visibly excited about her own ascension, if she posts the numbers or references the brand inquiries, or lets the energy of what is clearly a genuine career breakthrough show on her face and in her content, she risks something with Darcey that no follower count and no brand deal is worth risking. The relationship. The actual relationship. Not the twin power content, not the synchronized posts, the real thing underneath all of that, which has survived things that would have ended most relationships, and which both of them have repeatedly, and I believe genuinely, described as the most important thing in their lives. She cannot celebrate too loudly without the celebration becoming a kind of wound. And if she mutes herself, if she downplays the moment, if she deflects the attention, if she redirects every conversation about her individual numbers back to the collective, back to twin power, back to the shared brand, she is not honoring what she has actually built. She is shrinking herself in service of a dynamic that has always required her to be slightly smaller than she actually is. And at some point in the career of anyone who has been slightly smaller than they actually are for a long time, the question of whether to keep shrinking becomes urgent in a way that cannot be permanently deferred. Stacey is standing at that question right now. The moment handed it to her. The metrics confirmed it. The resubmitted inquiries addressed it directly, professionally, in dollar figures. And how she answers it, whether she steps fully into what the numbers are saying about her individual value, or whether she pulls back in service of the twinship, will define not just her career trajectory, but her understanding of herself as a person who exists independently of the most important relationship in her life. That is not a small question. That is, in fact, one of the largest questions a human being can be asked. Who are you when you are not defined by your most important relationship? What are you capable of when the framework that has always contained your ambition is suddenly revealed to be smaller than the ambition itself? The specific isolation that Darcey is experiencing right now, and I want to return to Darcey here because I think this dimension of her experience is the one that gets the least attention and deserves the most, is a kind of loneliness that has almost no cultural parallel and therefore almost no script. Every person that Darcey might normally turn to when she is processing something difficult is either Stacey, who is the source of the difficulty and therefore cannot be the processing partner for it, or someone in the shared Silva orbit who has loyalties and interests and relationships on both sides of this dynamic and therefore cannot be fully neutral about any of it. There is no person in Darcey's immediate ecosystem who can hold her experience of this moment without also being aware of Stacey's experience of it, without the knowledge of both sides affecting the support they are able to offer to either one. And the grief, and I do think grief is the right word here, even if it sounds dramatic, because what Darcey is experiencing is a genuine loss, even if it is a loss of something she never explicitly named as something she had the grief of. Being surpassed by your twin is not something that exists in the standard cultural inventory of pain that we have language and rituals and support structures for. It is not a breakup, though it has elements of the specific devastation of a breakup. It is not a professional setback in the ordinary sense, though it has profound professional dimensions. It is not a loss of relationship because the relationship is still there, still intact, still the most important thing to both of them. It is something more precise and more disorienting than any of those things. It is the discovery that the person who is most like you, who shares your face, your history, your foundational story, the very DNA that makes you who you are, has found a way to do what you do in a manner that is right now, in this measurable and documented and industry acknowledged moment, more effective than the way you are doing it. There is no greeting card for that specific pain. There is no playlist for it. There is no established ritual for processing it or moving through it or arriving on the other side of it in a way that keeps everything intact. There is just the metric dashboard refreshing with new numbers. And Darcey, sitting with those numbers, in a silence that the people around her are professional enough to maintain, but not skilled enough to completely conceal. What happens next, and this is the part that I genuinely cannot predict with confidence, which is a significant statement from a channel that spends a lot of time identifying patterns. What happens next depends entirely on which version of Darcey shows up to meet this moment, because there are multiple versions available to her. There is the version that has shown up in the past when external metrics moved against her, the version that retreats inward, that processes privately and sometimes not cleanly, that reemerges into public view slightly altered, slightly defensive, the wound visible underneath whatever new presentation she has assembled around it. That version is understandable. That version is human. That version will not serve her in this particular situation. And then there is another version that Darcey has demonstrated she is capable of in the moments across her public life when the grace she is capable of actually shows up unperformed and unstrategic. The version that takes the data, sits with it honestly, finds something real inside the declaration that Stacey's win is her win, and builds from that something genuine rather than something performed. That version is harder to access. It requires a kind of internal work that is unglamorous and unphotographable and generates no content and receives no immediate metric reward. But that version is the one that comes out of this moment with the relationship intact, with her dignity intact, and with something genuinely new to offer an audience that has been watching her for years and is waiting without always being able to articulate what they are waiting for the version of Darcey that finally knows how to be happy without the numbers being in her favor. The professional landscape around all of this is shifting in ways that will become visible over the next few months. And I want to give you the specific things to watch for so that you are not surprised by them when they arrive. Watch for how TLC frames the next season's promotional material specifically. Watch for whose name appears first in the promotional copy. Whose face is positioned where in the key art. Whose storyline gets the most real estate in the trailer. Title order is a contract in this industry. Promotional positioning is a communication from a network to its audience about who it believes is the primary draw. If that positioning shifts even subtly, even in ways that require you to be paying close attention to notice, it will be the network reading the same metrics that the brands have already read and responding to them with the language that networks speak, which is the language of promotional emphasis and screen time and story centrality. Watch for whether Stacey takes a solo meeting, whether there is any public or semi-public indication that she is having conversations with networks or brands or management structures that are specifically and exclusively about her as an individual entity rather than as half of a twin package. Solo meetings in this industry are not always announced. They are sometimes visible in retrospect, in the texture of what someone posts before and after they happen, in the shift in how they talk about their future when a journalist asks them about it, in the specific confidence that tends to appear in someone's public presentation after they have sat in a room and been told that the room was arranged specifically for them. Watch for the friend group dynamics for who shows up in whose content, for whose name gets dropped in whose interviews, for the subtle but legible signals that social circles in this space are sending about which side of a shifting dynamic they are positioning themselves on. Friend groups in reality television are not neutral. They are coalitions with interests, and coalitions recalibrate around new power arrangements with a speed that is occasionally breathtaking to observe. And watch, most importantly, for the joint content. Watch its frequency, watch its energy. Watch whether the twin power posts feel like they are coming from a place of genuine celebration or from a place of strategic necessity. Watch whether the comments on those posts are responding to something real or responding to something assembled. Audiences are not always able to articulate exactly what they are sensing when the authenticity of a piece of content is not fully there, but they sense it. The engagement numbers reflect it. The saves and shares and genuine interactions tell the story that the surface of the content is trying not to tell. Because here is the thing about this entire story that I keep coming back to. The thing that makes it genuinely compelling beyond the metrics and the brand inquiries and the industry positioning. Both of these women are at their core people who love each other in a way that is rare and real, and that the cameras have captured enough genuine evidence of over enough seasons that I believe it completely. The twin bond between Darcey and Stacey Silva is not a production construct. It is not content. It is the actual foundational reality of both of their lives. And it was real before the cameras arrived, and it will be real after the cameras eventually move on to whatever story comes next. The question is not whether that love is genuine. The question is whether that love is strong enough, flexible enough, and honest enough to survive a reconfiguration of the external framework that has always surrounded it. The external framework, the title order, the follower counts, the brand deal structures, the network's framing, the audience's understanding of who is the primary draw is shifting. That shift was not chosen by either of them. It arrived, as significant shifts in life tend to arrive, on its own timeline and with its own agenda. What both of them do with it, how Darcey finds a way to metabolize a reality she did not anticipate, and how Stacey finds a way to inhabit a position she has always deserved without it costing her the relationship that matters more to her than any number on any platform, is the chapter that this franchise has been, without knowing it, building toward since the very first episode where they stood side by side and the title card read, Darcey and Stacey. The point of no return was the resubmitted brand inquiry, the one that came back with one name on it and one name not on it. Before that inquiry, everything was still theoretical. The metric shift was a trend that could be dismissed, contextualized, explained away in the conversations that people in this ecosystem have with themselves when the data is telling them something they do not want to hear. After that inquiry, the metric shift became a documented professional act with a dollar figure attached to it. And professional acts with dollar figures attached to them do not get contextualized away. They get processed by accountants and managers and network executives and eventually by the people whose careers they most directly affect. TLC is processing that signal. The brands who received those resubmitted inquiries have already processed it and acted on it. Other networks and other opportunities and other versions of what both of these women's careers could look like are processing it in real time. And Darcey Silva, who has built her entire professional identity on being the one whose name comes first, who has carried the weight of being the anchor and the draw and the face and the thumbnail through seasons of personal upheaval that would have driven most people entirely off camera, is reading a signal that says, for the first time in a career built entirely in public view, the name that comes first might be changing. Not gone, not erased, not irrelevant, but repositioned. And repositioning, even when it is survivable, even when everything on the other side of it is fine and possibly better, is one of the most disorienting experiences available to a human being, because it requires you to locate yourself without the coordinates you have always used to know where you are. How she responds to that signal with genuine grace or with performed grace, with real growth or with strategic content, with the actual expansion of your win is my win into territory that costs her something real, is the chapter that will define not just her career going forward, but the relationship that has always been the most important thing in both of their lives. And how Stacey navigates her own side of this with integrity, with care for the relationship, with the honesty to stand fully in what she has built without apologizing for it, is equally the chapter that will define what she is capable of when the framework finally gives her room to find out. This is not a story about two sisters competing. It is a story about two people who love each other being asked, by circumstances neither of them fully controlled, to find out whether that love can hold its shape inside an arrangement that looks different from every arrangement that love has ever had to hold before. The metrics are just the occasion. Love is the subject. And the love is real, complicated, tested in a way it has never been tested, photographed in matching outfits while something much more serious happens underneath the photographs, is what makes this story worth watching. Subscribe to the tell-all tapes right now if you are not already subscribed, because this chapter is not over. It is, as I said at the beginning, just getting started. Hit the like button if this breakdown gives you something to think about. Share this with someone in your 90-day community who has been watching the Darcey and Stacey dynamic and sensing that something has shifted without being able to name exactly what it is. Turn on notifications so you are here when the next development breaks, because in a story moving at the speed this one is moving, the next development is not going to wait for you to remember to check back. We will be here, watching the numbers, reading the silence, and telling you everything the official content is carefully not saying. That is what we do, that is what we will keep doing, and we will see you in the next one.